So we don't spend much time watching telly, do we? But it is important to check on how the dinosaur media, or their channels, decide to transmit to the boomers what their worldview should be. And I promise in this segment, we're going to be able to fact check all of the cringe that we've seen on the likes of ITV and the BBC recently, and enjoy the gradual demise of their socialist presuppositions, but also celebrate the success of our sibling networks, because they've been trying to be cancelled, but it continues to be rather successful. Speaking of a remoralised national vision, you can go and subscribe to the website, and also you can listen to and read this for free. It's free. And the audio track is recorded by its author, Bo Dade. It's a red pill testimony, and I decided to plug this piece just because I think it deserves a hell of a lot more attention than it's already gotten. And it's better than pretty much any political speech given in the last 50 years, and it seems like the cry from the man under the boot heel of the person that's colonising his country. And culturally, we're being absolutely atomised and erased, as we've seen from the recent ONS and census statistics, and I think Bo words it pretty perfectly. So go and enjoy that rather than the question time clips I'm about to subject you to, because David Lammy was on last week, our mutual favourite politician and unfortunately future Justice Secretary, if we're judging by the polling.
Local man who thinks smoke is racist.
Yeah, the Vatican, right? Yes, yeah. The one time I actually agreed with the current person occupying the Vatican, even though he's a disciple of Paolo Freire. So one of the audience members, this was in Dulwich. Dulwich is a Labour stronghold, and they really packed out the audience with people that worked at the NHS. And this woman said that she had been disabled by long COVID. Obviously, our sympathies go out to her. And she was complaining on and on about how the Tories, of all people, have destroyed the NHS. So, sorry, we're going to have to listen to this person.
As someone who has been left disabled by long COVID, I was completely fit and healthy before, and now my life as I knew it is unrecognisable. I'm not getting appointments, I'm not getting the help. My GP actually says long COVID clinics are a myth. What we need is multidisciplinary places where you can go, where you can get help. It's just not happening.
So how's it affecting you?
I mean, at my worst, I mean, as you saw, I came in a wheelchair. I'm pushing myself to do what I can, but it affects, it's a blood disease that stops the oxygen getting around your body, which affects any or all of your organs. The press keeps saying it's a respiratory disease. In older people, it tends to be more often respiratory, but in younger people, it tends more often to be heart or other stuff. So you're seeing increased numbers of heart attacks, things like that. And it is so urgent. People are being left with no help. When you're alone, you don't have a carer, you don't have the help that you need, you are just stuck in bed. You're not able to do the things you do. I'm actually a founding member of a charity called Long COVID Support. We've been desperately trying to do what we can to help and support people where we can, reading all the peer research papers that are out there, trying to learn, trying to share that information.
But where is the
support from the experts?
Right, you're not getting support.
Because that's not, we're the ill people. We're doing our own, we're being the most resilient you can be. And so I have met the most resilient people I've met in my life through this. But we need help. And the constant underfunding of the NHS across the board is disgusting. People are dying. People are killing themselves because they don't want to live a disabled life. And that's another issue. The fact that disabled people are looked less than. We're hardworking, we want to work, we want to get on with our lives. I didn't choose to suddenly stop.
Okay.
Obviously tragic that her heart attacks and blood issues were caused by COVID. Definitely. And if we go next to David Lammy's response to this at some point in the programme, he just doubles down on this myth. And the reason I'm highlighting this is because I feel like time and time again we need to do our job to refute it. So we can listen to our favourite politician, shall we?
It's desperate. Right across the NHS. You can't find an NHS dentist. I met a woman who's been waiting for an appointment at a bowel clinic for 18 months. The government's ambition is that you should see your GP within 2 weeks. We had a decade of cuts in the National Health Service, and now as a consequence of the black hole that they gave us, they're talking about further austerity in public services. The NHS is on its knees. Nurses are leaving because they want a less stressful life. They're having to take their own kids to food banks. It is desperate, and this is the 6th richest economy in the world. And I hope when we get that next general election, Lucy, your party will be held to account for what you've done for the National Health Service.
I wonder why no one can see an NHS doctor for 18 months. Perhaps it's because you locked down the country, David. Might be to do with that, maybe. Just a hint.
All the burning of the money. I just can't get over it. The NHS is underfunded endlessly. We are told this. I don't know if you have the graph for this segment.
Oh, we've got some now, yeah.
Yeah, it's not.
Nope.
What's happened is the money is wasted
Yeah.
within the system.
Yeah.
Just like, what's that graph between, everyone must have seen it, like the number of doctors in the NHS versus the number of administrators over time. And it's just like administrators are just through the roof, doctors, no real change.
The £70,000 a year diversity SARs that get paid to take meat out of the cafeteria or paint rainbow crosswalks.
I keep spending all this money, but no one can see a doctor. It's like, yeah, it's because you're not spending it on doctors.
Yeah. I'm
It's not
dying.
hard.
Wait, let me wear my pride pin. So I'm just going to decide to fact check the NHS budget claims because we're kind of sick of it. If we can just go down, John, to this graph. So this is the Department of Health and Social Care spending. And
This is real terms, so it's adjusted for inflation, before anyone says that.
Yeah, exactly. And since 2007, it's just been going up and up and up and up and up to new records every single year. And it hits 2020 and 2021, and it's 191 billion and 190 billion respectively. A lot of that is additional cash injections for covering the costs of COVID and lockdowns. But then if we look to the projections for 2022 to 2025, it continues to stay at about 175 billion pounds a year. So it's going to continue to rise, even if you deduct the emergency spending that was conducted because of 2 years of COVID. So we can go to just the next one as well. Some key facts and figures about the NHS. So with the UK population rounded up to about 68 million, because the 2020 ONS figures estimated 67.1 million, and we obviously know that there are probably far more than that in terms of illegal migrants or people that are just off the books, but let's be really charitable and only go up by about 1 million. It works out to spending about £2,941.18, a little bit of change, per person every single year. So that should cover the costs, particularly because lots of people are quite healthy and don't need that kind of spending. We're actually the second lowest for healthcare spending per capita in the OECD, but it's been 10% of our GDP as of 2019, according to the WHO, prior to the budget increase of COVID, of course, and it's still going to say relatively the same, and it's remaining high relative to the decrease in GDP total per capita growth thanks to the said lockdowns that cause us to spend so much. So it's competitive with inflation even now, and as our GDP has subsided, we're technically spending more of that proportion as it goes on. So we are just a health service with a country attached at this point. As you can see with this graph, that percentage of GDP is the average for comparable countries. So it's about 10, and that's only going to go up considering the health spending is going to go up, but our growth is going to continue to stagnate. And before people say it, no, stagnating growth is not a reason for increasing migration, because we can go to the next one. That's where all the demand is coming from. So there were 2,082,321 visas granted in the year ending June 2022. So this only came out recently. So they're saying it's 34% fewer than the calendar year of 2019, primarily due to the pandemic. But that's immediately going to go back up, especially with all the trade deals. And that's still 2 million people plus who can, every time they come in, use the health service free from the point of use without ever paying a penny in. And lots of people are health tourists, and they come over here and have their kids because it's a much nicer place to have them than lots of other countries around the world, and don't support the system whatsoever.
So I know if you come here and you're a student, you have to pay a tax. If you're I think it's outside of the EU student, but that's all gone anyway, to pay for that, just in case. But you're essentially paying an insurance payment, which won't pay for everything you use if you do use it, because it's a gamble.
Do you know what the rate of tax is?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay, well, I'm going to take a guess and assume that given they're students, it's probably significantly less than the £2,000 per head as well. So, again, we're just hemorrhaging funds. So the idea, Mr. Lammy and disabled woman in the audience, that the NHS is chronically underfunded, no, it can just never meet demand. So also affecting housing, of course, just a little branch off. This is the first video we actually did together. First video we did for the site. You can go and watch that in your own time, but just to summarise, we're basically building houses just for the new migrants every year because we're building less houses than there are people coming in, and the size of migrant households is significantly larger than the UK's, and we're sub-replacement birth rate, so where's all the demand coming from?
Just if the native population isn't having enough kids to even replace themselves, then who is all the new houses for?
Great question. Though, God forbid we reform any of this system, because if we can look at this one, the social care cap faces delay until the election in 2024. Rishi Sunak's attempt to fill the financial black hole left by, I wonder if it's his pandemic spending, but the NHS budget will be protected from cuts. And if we remember as well, there was a woman...
As if it's never been before.
Yeah, exactly.
This is new.
From the guy who was health secretary at the time they're accusing of all these cuts, who is now chancellor, who's refusing to cut it.
We have literally never cut the NHS, but don't worry, it's protected from cuts, which have never happened.
Well, do you
never will happen.
Do you remember there was a woman fairly recently who, blithering idiot or not, said she was going to reform the system and actually get more cost effectiveness, and they literally staged a coup to get her out.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Oh well, suppose public spending doesn't matter because we'll all be swallowed by the sun monster very soon. If we can watch this next clip, this was also part of Question Time, and again I feel like I just have to debunk the mainstream narratives because there are still a few scarce people watching them, so you can come here instead.
I think it's a bit ridiculous to say that climate change is not as bad as it is, because did we not all experience this summer where we got 40-degree heat? That's unheard of. And also the floods that have been happening in Pakistan, 30 million people displaced.
30 years ago as well.
Yeah, climate refugees is that's in our future. It's really immediate, and I think this summer should have shown everybody that we thought maybe it's going to be in a few 30 years time, 2050, but it's happening right now, and I think we really need to take action.
It's called weather. Woman.
Good on you, Julia. So first of all,
sorry, it's so brain dead, isn't it?
I know. Well, it's the Cali girl inflection.
Day was warm, so we were going to die from heat.
Climate changes when some are hot.
I can't get over it. It's in Texas, remember when it was cold? Not too long ago? No climate change.
Yeah.
You're wasting my time. Trends are not set by single events.
Yeah.
Everyone knows this at this point. But they still do it.
But the reason I've raised these two is because when Julia then refuted that as the only dissident rightist voice on the panel, and even then, I like Julia very much when I've been on her show, but she is very tepid on the housing issue and anything to do with American politics, so she's not quite as rightist dissident as we are. But when she said, climate change isn't apocalyptic even by their own reports, I've read them, and also the NHS is very good at everything except saving lives, which is demonstrable by the fact that everyone's on a waiting list, she got booed for these observable facts, whereas Imitation Valley Girl there got a massive round of applause. And
I'm not sure I want these people moving over to watching us. I think I'm quite happy with them being in their own little safe space.
I think the viewers of Question Time would be very nice to come over and watch us because the audience is already very much handpicked. Yeah,
Cali girls.
Oh yeah, well I can fix her. I just thought I'd refute the climate catastrophe narrative again to set you all at ease. So the wonderful Bjorn Lomborg here, who's written some very good books like Cool It and False Alarm. He's an economist and he's assessed the UN's goals, and he found that if you decided to do the UN's policies for climate change, even if we took their IPCC predictions at face value, even the worst ones, then it would be the second least cost effective out of all 17 sustainable goals. And then William Nordhaus as well turned around and said, and he's a Nobel Prize winning economist, even if you took the worst of the UN's predictions and followed all their policies, you do more damage by actually giving them all the money to give everything than if you just let climate change rip through the entire world and did sweeps at all. So Bjorn Lomborg gives us an optimistic reading here. As temperatures increased over the past 2 decades, that has caused an extra 116,000 heat deaths every year. This, of course, fits the narrative of climate change and what we've heard over and over again, but it turns out that because global warming has also reduced cold waves, we now see 283,000 fewer cold deaths. You don't hear this, but so far, climate change has saved 166,000 lives every year. It also mentioned climate upsides, like the fact that more CO2 in the atmosphere has acted as a fertilizer and created a profound global greening of the planet. One NASA study found that over a period of 35 years, climate change added an area of the green equivalent to twice the size of the continental United States. Now, obviously, you can say, we're concerned about soil aridity and the lack of nutrition in different crops and You can solve all those issues. Basically, human beings can adapt. It's not as apocalyptic as we're worried about.
I don't really get into the climate stuff, but I am just bored.
Yeah, I don't blame
people telling you exactly what's going to happen, which will be, global death is usually the narrative you get. And it's just painful because it's just you don't know. You haven't considered half of the stuff that will happen in response. You have no idea. And this happens every 10 years when new data comes out. It's actually, all this other stuff that we didn't think would happen because we hadn't thought about it has happened.
Well, that's why the term has been broadened, and we're absolutely going to get the little Wikipedia bar underneath the YouTube section of this segment. That's why the term's been broadened from global cooling to global warming to now the all-encompassing climate change, because they want an unfalsifiable apocalyptic doomsday
So you know
prediction.
change will happen. So yeah, is that good or bad?
Yeah, it's morally neutral, and also we can adapt to it. If we go to the next one, just a little bit of reporting here. Just if you were worried about the worst predictions for adverse weather events, non-tectonic hurricanes, floods, droughts, etc., it turns out that even though they've apparently quadrupled since 1970, and they're forecasted to increase by about 40% by the 2050 deadline, they've decreased in lethality by 99% over 100 years. Because humans, funnily enough, don't stand on the shoreline and allow the water to creep up past their shins and go, oh my god, I'm drowning, I guess I can't do anything about it.
Advance notice now as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we should be fine. We shouldn't just collapse our economies doing it. I think we should be able to tackle this. Anyway, so if we go on to the next one, the BBC's competition also has, well, some very strange stuff they're doing with youth culture. This is Woo, an outlet. If we can just scroll down through this, John. A lot of these weird articles are coming up on climate change, on black identity issues, all this sort of stuff. If we can go to their About Us page, the outlet's run by ITV, and it says, our purpose is to make people feel good. With inclusivity at the core of our business, we bring wellness to a generation that's traditionally been underserved by the industry, because we believe feeling good isn't something that should be accessible to older, richer people. Whether you're looking for CBD, dildos, sneakers or skincare, Woo brings together a diverse range of feel-good products that, alongside our media brand, aim to create space for more joy and care into your life. Their values include being progressive, youthful, fluid, meaning we are entering the age of fluidity, blurring the lines of culture, genres, genders, and everything in between. And inclusive. So this is ITV funding this, so all the people watching the adverts during Coronation Street are bankrolling the propaganda of your kids with stuff like this article. Subversive nonsense in the next tab. An expert explains how to make the switch to non-monogamy. For couples who are thinking about exploring life beyond monogamy, there is one central question: how to open your relationship. There's no right answer because every relationship is slightly different. A 2020 YouGov poll found that a third of adults in the US would still say their ideal relationship would be non-monogamous to some degree. I looked at the poll actually in this, and it said more than 1,300 US adults, so that's a very small sample size, found that 1/3, 32%, say their ideal relationship is non-monogamous to some degree. Millennials, 43%, are most likely, but then also another 43% said they want to be completely monogamous. So it's a completely bunk article, but it's trying to sell alternative lifestyles to Gen Zers, bankrolled by a bunch of boomers watching adverts at primetime soaps, to say, oh, well, aren't the LGBTQ community that are associated with non-monogamy viewing life from a marginalised lens? And so you can get a wider perspective by opening up your relationship. All this kind of nonsense.
I really hate these polls. Where it's just like a third of people want to be monogamous. Like, real preference isn't that. Everyone knows it.
No, you're also manufacturing consent by just soliciting these kinds of responses. It's not great.
Why are a third of the people you meet not in non-monogamous relationships?
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But there's also the fact that a lot of these outlets are obviously their viewing figures are going down. Meanwhile, GB News, sister outlet of ours, lots of guests like Leo and Nick come frequently on our show from that outlet, and I go on there a fair bit as well. They're having their advertisers attacked. They have since launch, and they're still under duress. Despite that, they're being very successful. The professional station is finding its feet in a growing audience, but a sinister left-wing outlet called Stop Funding Hate has attempted to starve it of its advertising revenue, and it seems that many in the advertising industry are willing accomplices. They originally targeted the Daily Mail, but obviously the Daily Mail was established at the time, and GB News was in its infancy, so they thought it was an easier target. Since its launch, GB News has been criticised for spreading problematic messages about climate change and unnameable respiratory disease, and demonising trans people at every opportunity. So over the past year, Stop Funding Hate volunteers have been working to identify the GB News advertisers. We're now seeing very few high-profile brands appearing on the channel. GB News Chief Executive Angelos Frandropoulos, I hope I'm saying that right, I'm definitely not, countering the threat from Stop Funding Hate has been a constant worry since the station was founded. We were cancelled before we launched, he told me. The jungle drums were beating on social media before we even got going. He admits this campaign was effective. Stop Funding Hate played a really central role in positioning us as a hate outfit, but their opposition is just prejudice. We're not hateful. We're here to disrupt a market that was static for 34 years. And he's referring to the fact that since Sky News, no new actual TV outlets were set up to provide news. So I thought we'd look at just Stop Funding Hate. I just stop there. Just stop thinking. A little while ago, when this happened, a bunch of Tory MPs wrote a letter to then Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng to say, well, they're a CIC, right? They're a community interest company, and that means they get certain tax exemptions because they're partner of the charity committee. Why do they have that when they're obviously political? The letter says, the 10 backbenchers said, we are concerned that since 2017, the campaigns group Stop Funding Hate, based in Manchester, has been exploiting the prestige that is afforded by CIC status and the privileged access that CICs have to grant many grants for taxpayers' money for overtly political means. A spokesman told Mail Online, in a free society, we all have the right to encourage brands to advertise ethically and avoid funding toxic media. To deny this would be to undermine basic free market principles. Oh, okay, so it's all right. Free speech when we do it. Sure. It's like the, you read Dune? Do you know who Frank Herbert is? The author of that.
Not off my head.
There's a quote that I found a little while ago that says, when I'm weaker than you, ask for freedom because that's according to your principles. When I'm stronger than you, I take away your freedom because it's according to my principles. It's the obvious repressive tolerance deflection of just saying like, oh, well, when we want to starve you of your advertisers, oh, don't worry, bro, it's just free speech. Just accountability culture. Definitely. Now, the frustrating thing is, and I know this sounds like I'm being a bit bleak, but we'll get to a positive at the end, don't worry. The frustrating thing is the Charity Commission decided to say, yeah, no, they're fine. There's no breach of CIC regulations and Stop Funding Hate can maintain its status, which is obvious nonsense because, I mean, unfortunately, if the Conservatives had any testicular fortitude, they'd not only go after Stop Funding Hate, but they'd also reform the Charity Commission. I had some run-ins with the Charity Commission before as well. I worked for an environmental policy advisory board. We're telling the government, basically, you're spending loads of money on net zero, please stop, because it's not going to work. And we were cancelled from Charity Commission status a couple of times for being too political when criticising Extinction Rebellion. But then the Marxist Library have protections from the Charity Commission. So frustrating that there's no appetite in politics to do anything about it. But back to the Telegraph article with some good news. How about this? Since, because GB News have been taking evasive action, the channel has appointed a new head of commercial who will be based in Manchester, not London, right near Stop Funding Hate, funnily enough, and she's getting new ad agencies. Also, John Cleese will be presenting his show soon, despite initially denigrating GB News as KGB News, which is just cringe, but seems he's been won around. And other big names have also signed up recently, among them Michael Portillo, who's quite a nice bloke actually, and Camilla Tominey, who was formerly associated with the Daily Telegraph, who's now their political presenter, and she's quite good. Increasingly, GB News looks like a good place to make a name for yourself. And it is working, because rather than stopping funding hate, they're just stopping watching nonsense. If we look at the comparative ratings of GB News, we've got some good news about it as well. The daily average views have actually climbed to a steady 30k a day, and those are without the comparable budgets of their rivals like Sky, BBC, and even Talk TV to many respect, which I don't want to denigrate a network I occasionally appear on, but they do have a lot of Murdoch money. Their YouTube and social media engagement is also much higher than any of those channels. The former head of digital, Rebecca Houston, who I had a bit of a bust up with once, but it's all water under the bridge, I guess, said that GB News is really a digital media business as a TV channel attached. And apparently the data says that the channel, which claims to have had 5 billion impressions across web and socials since launch, has reason to be bullish about its digital reach. At the start of February, it had 2.9 billion impressions, according to its own released figures. And on YouTube, GB News has more followers, 474,000, than LBC, News UK, and Times Radio. So, again, the dissident networks, or at least as much as GB News can get away with, the likes of Mark Stein, are doing rather well. And I thought I'd just finish, again, with this little white pill segment. Look, congratulations to Lawrence Fox, because after taking over from Nigel Farage for quite a while, he's getting his own show. So that should be quite fun, especially as a lot of the marginal right-wing networks are coming to, not right-wing networks, right-wing parties, some more successful than others, are trying to come together to talk it out. And, of course, friend of the show, Calvin Robinson, had them on his show. And I just thought I'd finish it off with a little thanks to everyone watching, because according to our social media manager, our analytics are all up as well. So this is where you can find us and follow us. But we currently, apparently, our alt tech reach has exceeded 100,000. Twitter interactions doubled in about a month. And our YouTube views and subscribers are all up. So thanks for everyone that pays for us and pays our wages and goes over to the site. Seems like the exodus from the current thing to alternative media, especially considering you just look outside and you get miserable about the state of things, is working. So moral up, lads. We're going to win the media war.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode obviously being a Halloween special. If you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.